Celebrating and showcasing extraordinary people who are doing incredible things to make our world a better place. This is Close Up Television. I'm your host, Jim Masters, and thanks for joining us. On today's episode, we celebrate Maureen and Al Santora. Maureen is a renowned educational advocate and a teacher whose career began back in 1967, only retired just a few years ago. Her husband, Al Santora, a revered retired NYFD chief who served the department for over 40 years. Maureen has been a vocal advocate for education and is a notable expert in the field. She supports families, students, and other professionals in shaping curriculum, sharing effective methods, and creating programs and policies. She made another notable contribution to education when she established, with her husband Al, the Christopher Santora Educational Scholarship Fund in honor of her son, who was a history major, then a substitute teacher and a firefighter. Sadly, Christopher passed away in the September 11th national tragedy. The Santora family has spent many years trying to make a difference and keep the memory of Christopher alive. Over the years, I've had the honor and privilege to speak with Maureen and Al Santora on multiple occasions on Close-Up Television and radio, including on the sacred grounds of the 9/11 Memorial in New York City. Recently, I had the opportunity to visit with Maureen and Al once again, and this time at their warm and inviting home in Astoria, Queens, New York City. We laughed, we caught up on this, that, and the other thing, but more importantly, Maureen and Al have a message they want to share in this exclusive conversation as we discuss the state of affairs of our world today. And together, they offer their thoughts, opinions, and positive words of encouragement on this episode of Close-Up Television. Now, in this conversation, we're going to hit on a lot of topics that are near and dear to both of your hearts, individually and as a couple. One of them is how society is today, the fact that there is this incredible growing intolerance for other people's opinions. We seem to be going in lots of different directions. Nobody's really listening. People don't want to, take time to express kindness and empathy. And that is something of paramount importance to each of you. Tell us about that.
Well, for me, it's sad. I'm very sad that we no longer can have a meaningful conversation with people who disagree with our point of view. That it ends up being an attack on character rather than just opinions. And so if you disagree with me, you're stupid, you're ignorant, you're demonic, you're amoral, which never used to be true. You used to be able to disagree with somebody and end up the conversation saying, I agree to disagree. And so that would end it, and you never necessarily agreed with the person and they didn't agree with you, but you understood their point of view by listening to what they had to say. That no longer is possible. And I have friends who I cannot have any conversations with on any kind of political issues whatsoever because we wouldn't be friends. And that saddens me because it means that your level of intensity in understanding the other person is now, eliminated. And so you're only on a superficial level, and so that's not really a meaningful relationship.
It's changed quite a bit. The old adage, you don't discuss religion and politics, and that was always true. However, it has gotten a lot worse now. The rhetoric from one side of the spectrum is if you don't agree with their point of view, it's an attack, constant attack. And as Maureen was saying, we have friends that you can't even discuss politics. If you even mention you're at odds, and where years ago you could agree to disagree. Today, you can't agree on anything because I'm here, you're there, and there is no mid-ground. It is sad. It's very sad.
The pandemic changed things in a dramatic way. What are some of the things you think, I'll start with you, Al, about the pandemic that really changed the way we're treating each other and the way we're thinking about our day-to-day living?
Without a doubt, the isolation and the lack of interaction with, friends, family, neighbors, that has certainly contributed to the already difficult situation that we find ourselves in today, and it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. And the younger people, teenagers, my family, they have no interest in anything as far as politics. You try to talk to people, oh no, I'm not interested. And we keep saying, well, you should get interested because this is the world that you're going to inherit. We're going to be gone, and this is what you're going to have to deal with. And they're not interested. And yet you listen to some of the commentary, and I have to laugh when you watch some of these shows. They do a man on the street, and they ask young people, maybe a little older than my grandchildren, but college age, who is Abraham Lincoln? I don't know. The president of France? I mean, these are the kind of answers you get, and just basic, simple things that are taught at a very early age are not being taught. And these young people today have absolutely no understanding of what's going on, and yet they profess such crazy agendas that they push forward and know nothing about what's behind it. Oh yes, we got to take care of the environment. You know, the world is going to end in 10 years. And hello? No, it's not. And I wish I'll be here to tell you so in 10 years. I may not be. But these kind of things are just off the wall.
Well, Al, could you imagine, being in the fire service all these years, if people were sort of apathetic, nobody had a voice, nobody wanted to say anything, and when there was a blaze happening, everybody just stayed there and said, well, I don't think we're going to go and help out. That would have been a problem, huh?
It certainly would be. You are there to serve, and that's what you do. You do it blindly, no matter what color, no matter what religion, no matter what side of politics you're on. We're not interested. We're there to save human life, and I think this is what we're getting further and further away from. That people don't understand that it's important to look at each other as human beings and not as, oh, you're a Democrat, oh, you're a Republican, oh, you're this color, you're that color, you're a racist. They're just absolutely crazy, absolutely crazy.
Same thing in the education system, Maureen. Could you imagine if here you are trying to educate young minds and influence them in the way that you do, and everybody at the system there in the school system said, I don't think we're going to help, we're apathetic, we're not interested?
Nothing would get done and everybody would be ignorant. They'd be ignorant, and unfortunately I see that that is beginning to occur. We used to be the top in the world. We no longer are. And one of the reasons we're not is that we've put priorities on equity and gender alignment and affiliations, with unions, and over the fact that as a teacher your job is to educate. And basic things like adding and subtracting and multiplication and division and writing cursive and instead of only manuscript, and being able to write a letter with your hand as opposed to a computer are being eliminated. And everything today, all the teachers today are required to put all of their lessons on Zoom, on the computers, and the kids read from the computers. So you don't have the same kind of dialogue that you used to have in a conversation. You don't have current events because that would stir up, a terrible melting turmoil in the classroom. And most teachers, when I was teaching, we were not allowed to indicate what religion we were, if any. It was just not a subject that we couldn't wear crosses or Stars of David or anything. We were not permitted to do any of that. And now we have teachers who are able to say what their sexual preference is, which is just totally inappropriate, and nobody cares. It doesn't make you a smarter person knowing or not knowing. your job, and that's another thing that I think is very difficult. Al spoke about the fire department. Their job is to save lives and protect people. So it doesn't matter what all these other things, are from a person's perspective. It only matters that when you're at your job, you're able to perform your job. And that's true of every job. Every waitress, a secretary, a beautician, whatever, an engineer, a doctor. Your personal preferences have nothing to do with you being successful in your job. And we need to get back to that. We need to get back to that, and we need to get back to being a little more tolerant of each other's perspectives and points of view. We don't ever have to agree, but we need to be more tolerant. And I think the anger component has caused tremendous, we see crime going up where people are so angry. Well, I think it's from a frustration that, we have a society of people who have been accustomed to getting their own way. And in your lifetime, you don't get your own way. And in your lifetime, you don't win every battle. And in your lifetime, you don't win every races, and you don't get the prize for everything you do or try to do. You have to learn to fail in order to be successful in life. And that has been eliminated. That has been eliminated in sports, it's been eliminated in schools, it's been eliminated on teams. Everybody gets the, you tried hard prize. Well, that's very nice if you're 3 or 4, all right? When you get beyond that, you have to learn that sometimes you're going to lose a game, or sometimes you're going to lose a spelling bee, or sometimes you're not going to be the best math student in the class. Somebody else is going to beat you. And if you want to beat them, you have to work harder. And it makes you stronger.
Right.
It makes you stronger, and it makes you a more tolerant person, regarding the fact that there are other people in the world besides yourself.
You've had an opportunity to express your desire, Maureen, to want to educate. And the educational system, as we've talked about on the radio, has changed dramatically. So much of the world has changed dramatically. But tell us about some of the things in the education system that you've seen that have changed, and not necessarily in a positive way.
Well, structure was the backbone. That's what got you to the next level. Is structure and consistency and repetition. That's what got you to the next level. And without that, you don't have an educated person. You just don't. You need to have some kind of structure where you go from step 1 to step 2. You can't go from step 1 to step 10, because those other steps have lessons to be learned as well. And even if they're minor lessons, or they're lessons that you're not particularly interested in, they are valuable in your education of getting to step 10. And that has to be returned. That has to be returned. And I think I'm happy to see that there are more and more parents who are becoming advocates. But we need a whole nation to become the advocate of the education of our children. And we need, mothers and fathers to be very involved in the children's education. And as busy as everybody is, and as hard as it is for everybody to fit in the time to go to a meeting, it is very, very important, because what you teach your child is that you care enough to be involved. And kids remember that. They remember that. So, those are things that, I hope, are going to evolve, because they haven't been around for a while.
Al, you agree with that as well?
Yes, without a doubt. You mentioned a couple of things. You mentioned failure. Failure and mistakes are a human trait. Everybody fails at something or makes a mistake. In the fire service, we have critiques. The critique is one of the most important lessons that a firefighter does, because he learns, or she learns, from the mistakes that they make. And you go over a situation and you learn from your mistakes. And that's a very important thing. So yes, failure is part of human trait. It's part of life. But from those mistakes you learn. And that's what we need, and we need to push that forward. And also was mentioned about unions. Unions are very effective, and unions have been very effective in the United States, especially over the years. They went from the workshops, the terrible conditions that they had in the 1900s, the late 1800s, 1900s. Unions came together and, were great. And they forced safety and things that were happening to workers. Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, it comes to mind as one of the things that occurred. And unions over the years have become very good for the worker. However, they have gone beyond. Now you're getting unions involved in politics. And once that occurs, then you have now turned the corner, so to speak. And they should stay very neutral, and they could come out, the union should come out and say, well, this is who we support, but now it's up to you. Do what you want as an individual. And that's what should happen, but that's not the case. In many unions, I know in the UFT, they require, it's not mandatory, but it's heavily promoted that you should pay each, out of each paycheck, a certain amount that goes to their political agenda. Well, you may not agree with the hierarchy in any situation of their the direction that they're going in. So the individual has to make up their own mind, and I think that's important, that they look at both sides of a picture of a story, and decide, well, this is good, this is bad, this is who I want to follow, this is who I don't want to follow, and things would be much better off if you do things that way instead of blindly following somebody who's saying, I got the banner, let's go. And you say, what is it? Well, yeah, okay, why not? It looks like a good party, so I'll just join you. I don't know if it's education or just awareness of what's going on. And once you become aware, you say, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that, And I think this is where we're at today. And they're being bombarded by all of these, not only the unions, but all of these social medias, as we said, and things just happening, and you're just hearing all this stuff, and many times it's one-sided. And unless you listen to A and then listen to B, as I said earlier, you've got to make the decision. You can't listen to one side.
Well, I was always, of thought that nothing is ever free, okay? So when you're offering, the carrot of all these free things, well, that's terrific when you're in your 20s. Oh, I'm going to get this and I'm going to get that, and it's going to be wonderful. But somebody has to pay, and maybe it's the wisdom of getting older and having paid that makes people kind of reassess all these free things that we are, being touted. And certainly everybody, regarding, global warming, and everybody can be a conservationist in their own home. You don't need to have, a degree, and you don't need to have a big hoopla to conserve. You reuse a shopping bag. Just basic, simple things. We do this all the time in the house. We separate the garbage. We, make it, if there's something that we can reuse again, we reuse it. Well, that's conservation. You know what I mean? You see all these young people with these plastic bottles. Where do they think these plastic bottles are going to go? It's plastic. And plastic is not biodegradable. No matter what they tell you, it's not biodegradable. So, if you wanted to be a conservationist, you'd bring a container that you could refill at home and bring, to school, or bring, wherever to work or whatever, and you wouldn't be buying all these plastic bottles. You wouldn't take these, styrofoam cups. You wouldn't, these are basic things that people, but they still sell them in the stores. And they're cheaper, so people buy them. So, you can do a lot of conservation just in your very own home, in your very own space. And if everybody did that, we would have a better world. We don't need to have this global, let's get rid of all the oil, and let's get rid of all the gas, and let's get on electricity. Well, electricity generators have to use propane, which is gas and oil. So, you know, you're still using that, and I don't think people make that connection. I think it's, you know, kind of very sad. But again, that is the lack of education on basic kinds of things that everybody should know about, and they don't. And it's this big, you know, selling point. So people are not thinking. They're blindly going along with all of these initiatives, and some of them are very good, and I'm not going to complain that they are not, but you need to have a very good idea of what's behind them and what it is going to cost you in the long run. You know what I mean? You're going to get an increase in Medicare. Well, that's wonderful, but somebody has to pay for that. You're going to reduce, you know, the drug. Well, somebody has to pay. Who is the somebody that you're talking about? You know, and those things are the like the gap in between. And at some point, you know, we need to be more thoughtful and educate ourselves, and we have an obligation as a citizen to educate ourselves on what we think is the best course for our country to take. And it may not agree with your neighbor, and that's perfectly okay. They have the same right as you, and they have the right to disagree with you, and you have the right to disagree with them. But to threaten them in some way, or to attack them, or to demean them in some way is just totally unacceptable.
You know, one of the things, Maureen, that we're hearing a lot about is some folks are saying, well, I don't need an education anymore because I can just do a quick TikTok video. I can bypass education and all of that farm system of working up the system, and I'll make $1 million and be a hit and a celebrity overnight. How do you feel about that?
You educate yourself for yourself. You don't educate yourself for your mother or your father or your brothers or sisters or anybody but yourself. You become an educated person because it makes you a more thoughtful, more resilient, more compassionate individual in most cases, and it changes the way you view the world. So when you are not educated, you are at a ceiling, and you never get beyond that ceiling. And when you get to be older, you are still at that ceiling. So it's wonderful to make the $1 million, and it's wonderful. You look at these sports people who are making millions and millions of dollars. Well, when they're in their 40s and 50s, unless they have had a plan about what they're going to do with the rest of their life, because their life is shortened in sports and in TikTok and all of this, what are they going to do? If you have education, you have options. And the options are the things that everybody should, you know, achieve and want to achieve. So maybe your gratification is delayed, but that's okay, because in the long run, your life will be better. You'll have a better life. You feel better about yourself. And you know, from all of these quick fixes of, you know, instant gratification and instant wealth and all of this, that's, you know, kudos to them, okay? Kudos to them. However, in the life expectancy, which is now reduced because of COVID, but we're still in the 70s, you still have a great number of years that you're going to have to live the rest of your life. And how are you going to live your life after this burst of fame? And then it disappears. And then what happens? Then you end up having depression. And you end up, I think a lot of the people on this TikTok have a tremendous longing to be loved. Mm-hmm. They have a tremendous longing to be loved. Well, that's a deficit in their life, because if you are loved, you don't need to do this. You don't. And it's wonderful if you have the skill and the ability, good for you, but that does not last. And you know, it's like the tortoise and the hare. If you're out for the long run, you're the tortoise. Right. So slow and steady wins the race, and you don't become, you know, the multi-millionaire at age 18 or 15 or 20 or whatever. You slowly earn, and as you say, your reputation and your character are the things that define you in life. And the way people, the way people remember you, you know, like you think about, we're at the age where we're seeing a lot of friends pass away. And the way they remember those friends and the way we remember those friends is their character. and the way they treated people and the love that they had. And you go to funerals where there are hundreds and hundreds of people who have come to pay their respects to somebody that they may have only met for a couple of weeks because they touched their life. Well, that's what you really want in life. You want in life, and we need more kindness, we need more compassion, we need more love, and I don't use the word love in this superficial way. Love is characterized by caring about somebody else more than yourself, and doing for somebody else,
Empathy.
and empathy. Strangers stepping out of their zone and helping somebody else that they never met to make their life better. That's love.
Each of you have had these extraordinary and revered careers. You, Maureen, in education since 1967, you, Al, and of course in fire service in New York City. Obviously, you have this desire and this passion to inspire and to empower others. And you've had these illustrious careers where you've really been able to express that. Tell us about the passion that you have for wanting to inspire, empower, and tell your story.
Well, I don't know, in my own case, I had no great desire to be a firefighter or even a civil servant. I had no idea. When I was 16, 17 years old, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I got my first job out of high school, and I certainly didn't enjoy my very first job. I was there for 2 weeks, left that, found another job which I kind of liked, and stayed there for 4 or 5 years, and was doing very well. But I wasn't making any kind of a living that that I could have. And I looked around and I saw people that were working for me at that time, that were in college or going or already had gone to college, and I'd say to myself, well, I'm their boss and they went to college. I should be able to go to college. I can do it. And so I started out that way, and then I got involved with somebody, kind of dragged me along into the fire department and found my niche in life, I guess. It's one thing. My son, on the other hand, so I was kind of led that way. My son, on the other hand, maybe because of my influence, but ever since when he was a little boy, he wanted to be a fireman. And we said, oh yeah, that's because of, the fire trucks and all of that stuff. And, but as he grew up, that interest never died. And sure enough, he knew where he wanted to go, what he wanted to do, even though he had gone to school, had gone to college, got his degree, became a teacher, still wanted to become a firefighter. And that's what he did. I give people a lot of credit when they have a goal and they move towards that goal. That doesn't always happen to everybody. And when I now watch my grandchildren, what do you want? Well, I don't know. I don't know. Nobody knows. They kind of shrug and go through life, but you got to start making some kind of decision. You got to start, even if this may not be what you really want, but at least you go for something. And this is what needs to happen. I think I don't know how you achieve that in life, but I think certainly education. And I didn't go to college right after high school, unlike Maureen, who went. I went. How many years?
16 years.
Yeah, but before I even went to school, I started in 1964. I graduated in 54. So 10 years later, I hadn't gone to college. Program came up. I was in a fire department at that time. Program came up, and I said, oh, this looks interesting. So I decided to go. So I started out, 6 credits here, 6 credits there. And before you know, so it took me 16 years to finish going nights. But once you get on that roll, it's like being on a treadmill. It's hard to get off because you don't want to push the button, and it starts accelerating, and And I would say there is very few joys in life other than when you achieve your goal, whatever it might be, whether it be bachelor, master's, whatever. There's just a feeling of exhilaration that you did it, and you did it on your own, and nobody did it for you. There's a tremendous feeling, and I think part of that is what is missing in the young people today. Kids, they go to school. What'd you do today? Oh, nothing. School was boring. Well, school was boring for me too when I went. You know, it's boring. But as you get older, you realize that it's more than boring. You're learning something. What did you learn today? Oh, I didn't learn anything. And then you sit down. Well, we were doing this. What are you doing? Oh, we're doing. What kind of lines was he doing the other day? You know,
I don't know.
On the maps. You know.
Yeah.
And I said,
Earth science he was doing with the.
Okay, so you're learning. So you don't realize you're learning, but you're learning. You need to keep plugging away at, try different things, look at different things. I often say today, I would hate to be a 16 or 17-year-old today because I don't know what I would want to do. Things have changed so dramatically, even in the fire service, even in all the civil service jobs. Certainly in law enforcement, you look at law enforcement today and you say, I would not direct any child towards law enforcement because it's so bad. And my advice would be a politician, because you can lie all day long and you can get a wonderful salary and a wonderful pension. But you got to get yourself elected. So you got to have a good gift of gab. And that's all you need is a good gift of gab, because there is nothing else that I would even know which direction to go in today. It would be very difficult. It's changed so much.
Well, the only job I knew I didn't want was to be a teacher. I was a good student in school. I was obedient. I was quiet. I did my job. And, you know, my parents' attitude was, if it's boring, that's okay. You're going to do it and do well. Things are not always filled with glamour and joy, and you stick with it and you finish the task. When you start a task, you complete the task, and whatever that task may be. And but I knew I was never going to be a teacher. When I went to college, I took courses in psychology, and I fell in love with. I ended up majoring in psychology. I started out as a math major because I loved math, except for geometry, which I didn't like too much. But I majored in psychology. I wanted to be a child psychologist, and I felt that it was very important for me to find out if I liked being with kids. If that was the path I was going to take, and I'd have to get a PhD, and I'd have to, you know, do all of this. And when I started to teach, I fell in love with the job. I loved being with the kids. They were just fresh and honest and eager to learn, and I worked very hard, and I always had a goal for everybody for the end of the year, you know, and so I pushed the kids pretty hard, and I've taught every grade from pre-K to grade 6. My favorite grade was kindergarten. But when I was, you know, in the upper grades, you had to have, you know, assessments, and you had to have accountability, and you had to tell parents, well, you know, your child is not doing his work or whatever. But in those days, the parents supported you 100%. And they worked with you and they helped you much more than today, where everybody is so busy, you know what I mean? And I can't fault every parent, because they really do their best on a number of occasions. But, you know, there was little forgiveness. If you didn't measure up, you didn't pass. Now, today, that's not necessarily true. You pass because of your situation, or because you've had a hard life, or because that doesn't help anybody, nobody. And I fell in love with the job, and I ended up, you know, going for a master's, and then 30 credits above the master's, and I have an administration degree, and I, you know, I never became an administrator because I liked being with the kids. And when you get out of the classroom, or you get out of the area where you are working with children, it's more of paper and pencil. and analytical and speaking with adults. Well, the kids are the ones that drive you, and they drive every teacher. And teachers do not go into the job for an exceptional pay. They go in because they want to help, you know. And so I had a fabulous, wonderful life. And I tell my grandchildren, I said, find something that you're passionate about. And it could be anything. It could be a secretary, it could be an engineer, it could be a beautician, it could be whatever it is that you're passionate about. Make that your career, because you'll have a wonderful life. And you'll make that career special and wonderful and fabulous, and you'll do 100% because you enjoy what you do. And if you don't like your career when you start out working, change it. Don't stay on a job because you're worried, you know. But of course, if you have the education, you have the option of quitting and starting. And if you don't have that education, you sometimes are at that ceiling and you cannot move on. So, you know, education empowers the individual. And when Al said, when you get that degree, it is for you. Now, sometimes your parents insist that you go, and you go, and you know, but when you get that degree, it is on you that you were able to pass, and you were able to do, and you were able to be successful. And it does something to your inner soul that you were successful in something that was hard. And doing things that are hard are very important in life. You shouldn't always be given everything. You shouldn't always be given the quick way out or the easy way. You know, I often think when I was doing my theses, I had to get first sources. I had to go to a library. I had to stay in the library because they wouldn't allow me to take these original sources home with me. Well, today everything is online. And that's not necessarily the same kind of effort that you make as getting up, going to the library, staying, you know, till the library closes to write and do all of that. And you know, I think, you know, you need to put in tremendous effort in life. All of the millionaires in life have worked very hard to be millionaires. Nobody becomes a millionaire just because, you know, and so these TikTok people think they're going to be millionaires for life. Well, they're not. They have to have some kind of work ethic. You know, you think of Elon Musk, he has a tremendous work ethic. And he's not afraid, and he's not intimidated, and that's a wonderful quality. But Bloomberg is the same way. And I could go on with all of these individuals who have been very successful. They've worked very, very hard at being successful. So if you want to be successful, you need to work hard.
Why is it so important for each of you to get this message out? I mean, you've done your part. You can check the bucket list and all the checklists there, the bullet points. You've done it. You've worked very hard in your individual careers. You've given back to the community, beloved, respected individuals, and you could be easily just in here looking at that beautiful Manhattan skyline and just relaxing and enjoying your retirement. But you have this passion, this thirst to want to communicate and get your story out, but also you want to help people sort of come back to this sense of togetherness. Why is this so important for each of you to do this and get this message out, to share your voice?
It's the next generation and the unborn generation to come. And if we don't really try very hard to kind of step back and go back in some ways. Now, you certainly don't want to go back to 1950, and you don't want, that's not what I'm saying, but I think that some of the qualities that were in existence years ago need to be reinvented. They always were there, but they need to be re-emphasized, and people need to be able to think, and you think of catastrophes. What's the very first thing people say? My family's okay. My family's alive. We lost everything. We have no house. We have no clothing. But my family is okay. And that's something that we need to stress. You know, the family structure is beginning to tear away in our current society. And, you know, we have a large family. And we fight and we argue and we have heated debates and people yell and scream at each other. But if somebody were to attack any one of us, we would all be en masse together supporting that person. And that's what we need. We need that kind of an old-fashioned situation where you support the people that you love and the people that love you, support you. And no matter how many fights or arguments, there isn't anything more important than your family, because when things get tough, they're the people who come around. And we need to make that. But I worry that our new generation is not having that as an experience. That you stay and fight and you argue and then you make up. And you forgive each other. Because there isn't anything more valuable. You know, when a person dies, they're dead. You can't say, gee, I'm sorry, if you haven't been nice to them or treated them well or done things to help them out in their lifetime. There's no taking back. You can't say, well, I wish I had, because it's too late. So do it now. Do it now when the opportunity is arising, and make every day like your last day.
Well, I think it's very important that people, they say there's a lack of love for God and country. And I think that's what the problem is, and that we as individuals need to speak out against things that we see. It would be just as easy to sit back and do nothing, without a doubt. But there are consequences. And the problem is that today it seems that there are no consequences for anything that anybody does. And what I would like to see is that that we survive as a God-fearing country, the love of country, and that that we move forward in the right direction, and not that we tear down each other and tear down everything that has happened. And we look at what has gone these past few years. Yes, did we do things that were probably inhumane? Yes. The country has, not only this country, but other countries still going on throughout the world, things that are intolerable. But you don't erase that by taking a giant eraser and removing it from the page, because it is history. It did happen. And people have to understand that again, it's a failure, and we learn from our failures.
You know, one of the things, too, that I've been saying that has changed things dramatically is of course, 9/11, and that changed the world in so many different respects. And you both know personally the effects of that.
Yes. Absolutely.
Definitely.
Yes, absolutely. And you know, we remember that in Astoria, our daughter, who ended up going in the military, went up the street and said, we're going to have a march, and if you don't put an American flag, we're going to boycott your store. And you know, we had in Astoria, there were stores that were owned by Muslims, and she didn't care. She said, this is America. This happened in our country. If you don't put up, we're going to boycott your store. And it was amazing on Broadway to see the number of people that cheered for the police, for the firemen, for the sanitation workers, for all the people, the nurses, the doctors who had worked down at Ground Zero. It was just an unbelievable, I mean, tremendously emotional, you know, and we benefited with gifts of love and cards from kids and all sorts of mementos that we still have, because we were so touched by the generosity of individuals that we never met. But 9/11 changed the world in a negative way, because we became very suspicious. We became very, watchful. We had to go through, great lengths to get on an airplane. We had to, show identification. We had all these things that we did not do prior to 9/11 now have become commonplace, and people don't think twice. You know, they get on a bus or they get on a train, they have to show identification. They have to make sure they have their bags checked. All of these other things that we never had to do when I was growing up. So our new generation only knows this. They don't know anything else. And so it's very important for them to understand that one act of hatred altered the world forever. And so if we continue with the acts of hatred that we are now perpetuating and encouraging, we're going to have another. Hopefully it will not be worse, but we're heading down the wrong path. We are, and that's why we feel it's important for us to speak out.
There is a circle of life, as they say, in after 9/11, as you indicated, there was a tremendous togetherness. Everybody came together, and it was us against them. And then very quickly it kind of dissipated. And this is what happens. Very quickly the narrative changes, and new things come up to take the place of what was, the outrage that was felt, and the concern that was felt, and the love and the compassion. That gets dissipated very quickly, and then something else fills the void. And this is what's happening today. You got a lot of things occurring that have changed the way we COVID was the prime example. The government stepped in heavy-handed, and determined all of the things that we were going to be doing, and the lock-ins and the lockouts, where you couldn't go to school unless you had a mask. You had to have all of these things impacted on us in a negative way. True, it was probably, in some sense, it was a precaution against something. But the lies that were coming out as a result of the this disease that occurred, and you didn't know what to believe. You didn't know whether they're telling you something for your own good, and the contradictions. And then you go back 2 years later and you look at what they said here and then what they said 6 months, and it kept changing. You get to the point, and you talked earlier about revolution and the Civil War. People are just astounded by the lies that are being, perpetuated by different facets of government. And people are just upset. And I think, again, goes back to why are we reaching out? Why do we want to say? Because I think voices of compassion, understanding, reality need to speak out. People need to speak their mind. And you may not agree with what I'm saying, but you have to be honest, and you have to put it out there so that other people can hear and say, yeah, I agree. Well, no, he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, blah, blah, blah. But at least you're doing something, you're contributing something to maybe calm these waters, because it's getting very, very rough. The waters are becoming very rough, and unless something is going to happen, and that's what I'm afraid of. And we're headed down the wrong path, as Maureen said, and it crosses education, it crosses every line.
And we're optimists by nature.
Yeah.
So,
and if we're feeling that way,
maybe, by some miracle of miracle, there'll be enough people, like the parents beginning to see the light and beginning to speak out and run for elections and try to change this tide. There'll be others who will speak out, and hopefully there'll be people of greater importance than us, because we're the small fish, We're the small fish, and that's the reality, So if we're able to get somebody on board who says, hey, maybe this is a good way to begin a dialogue and to begin a conversation, I'm very, very, very happy, and I will feel that I have been very successful.
You've created this wonderful scholarship fund, the Christopher Santora Educational Scholarship Fund, in memory of your son, Christopher. Tell us about that.
Well, our son was an American history buff, and he knew more of American history than anybody I've ever met. He read all the books, he knew all the battles, when we went to Gettysburg, he spent the whole day and was upset that he had to leave because he wanted to go to another battlefield that, they didn't, and his sisters couldn't care less, at the moment. After a half an hour they were done with, but not Christopher, because he remembered all, but, that was who he was as a person, and he was very, very, so when he died, we wanted in some way to keep his memory alive. He was extremely intelligent, but didn't care about that. That was not important to him at all. And he remembered all these facts, and so we thought, well, we would have to do some kind of a competition to pick out the one, and our competition was not geared at the top student. It was geared at the student who wrote the most passionately about whatever topic we chose, and we talked about the topics every year, and some of them were more political than others, but they were all history oriented, so each year we had judges. When we were in our heyday, we had 50 judges because we had an awful lot of schools, and of course we couldn't keep up with that. It became just so overwhelming. We had a big dinner dance and we collected funds and all of this, but now we have contributions that come in every year, and that determines the number of scholarships we give. And so this year we have two that are going to be winners, and they'll start off with a $2,000 scholarship. And if they continue school, they will get $2,000 for each of the 4 years that they are in school. So it's an $8,000 scholarship that we offer. And, when we collect enough money to do that, we're able to offer, So we're very pleased about the fact that it's still going on after 21 years. We'll do more if we get more funds, and that's really, for us, the bottom line. We contribute every year, and our children, our own children contribute too. But we don't contribute as much money as we would like to be able to, do this on our own. So we encourage people, to step forward and donate whatever they wish to donate. And we have people who do that every year, and we're very grateful for their contributions, So it's a good thing, and even though it's diminished, we're still going. And so for that, I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful for the generous souls, who we've gotten to know. We didn't know them before, but we've gotten to know, and they still contribute to us every year. So it's very good. It's wonderful.
Right. This, of course, in honor of Christopher, and obviously it's sort of like the chip off the old block there. He obviously, firefighter, educator, wanting to give back, wanting to serve others, which is such a beautiful thing. I'll start with you, Maureen. Tell us about Christopher.
Well, if I were to pick a singular thing, and there were so many things I could choose, I would say he loved his family immeasurably. He would do anything for his family. He had a lot of friends. He was a very good friend. He was a person that, but he loved his family. And, throughout his young life, he died at 23, his family was the most important thing to him, which is a very nice thing for a young man to say. And I can say that, without any hesitation, He was very smart. He was very, there were a lot of characteristics he had, but his family was the number one thing in his life.
And Al?
I would probably agree with that.
What, in summary, would be one thing each of you would like to share with our viewers that might resonate even deeper with them about what we've talked about today?
All right, well, I probably would like to tell anybody who is listening to this that even though they might be a little voice, their voice needs to be heard. And especially today, in the kind of turmoil that we are now experiencing on multiple levels, across the board, the old adage, if you see something, say something. And I think that's what people can do. And if you have a lot of little voices, you have a big voice. And so all the little voices combined, saying something, objecting to something, making the effort to write a letter or a call on the phone, or making an objection to something that they disagree with, if that's added up into a lot of other little voices, you have a gigantic voice. And even though we are little voices, if we as a group start this new age of trying to reverse the kind of hatred and the vitriol and the contempt and the demeaning of another person, and try to replace that with tolerance and affection and the ability to listen to another point of view, we'll end up with a better world. We can't change the world, but in our little way, we can change our world. And that's what I hope people will be able to feel that they can do, that there's always hope.
I couldn't have said it better.
Maureen and Al Santora, two very special people who have dutifully and honorably served in their respective careers and endeavors, and who truly care about the greater good, making our world a better place, and who still, even in retirement, work hard to spread their positive message of hope, kindness, and empathy as they honor their son Christopher Santora, and they touch so many lives in the process. Truly remarkable and inspiring people. For Close Up Television and Radio, I'm Jim Masters. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.